Shalom, and welcome to another in our series of podcasts from Temple Beth Am, a dynamic center for conservative Judaism in Los Angeles. This is a recording of our weekly Rashi study class with Rabbi Rebecca Schatz.
Hi, everyone. It feels like it's been since Purim, since we met. It feels like a long time, but we're really only at verse 14, which I know it sounds insane. But I would love for, and because I do a lot of the talking in here, I would love for us to just generally have a sense of where we left off. Obviously, I know we all know the story, but because we're taking it apart with a fine-tooth comb, I think it would be good for us to just remember where we left off. Don't tell us where we're going. We're going to do that all together. But tell us where we left off. And even if you remember some of the commentaries or some of the additions that were made through via conversation, it'd be interesting to have those also as a reminder as we step foot into verse 14. Anybody want to just do a very brief? Yeah, Paul.
The main thing we were talking about when...
You can move the microphone a little bit further away from your face, yeah.
The main thing... This okay?
Yeah, that's great.
The main thing we were talking about was taking apart exactly what happened when Vashti was sent for and refused to come, and just what the context of that was. Would she have been... Was the way she refused offensive, or should she have come, or was his request offensive because she wasn't expecting it, or we're basically, and what was the and also we're talking about the midrash that he expected her to show up naked, and we were basically saying that was just a midrash, had nothing to do with the Megillah. There's another midrash that she wanted to come naked. So it was just all very confusing.
Great. So before Larry adds to that was a very lovely summary. Yeah. Thank you. Before Larry adds to that, I just want to remind everyone, because we're going to get into the next few pieces are not going to have as much of this. One of the main things that we discussed and that we saw quite a bit, and Paul just mentioned this briefly, is that the rabbis really wanted to find reason for all the things that Vashti was doing or was not doing. But that is in addition to the Megillah. That is not in the Megillah, right? If we just read the Megillah, none of those midrashim, obviously, but those reasonings, those rabbinic understandings, or sometimes let's call them excuses, I guess, for behaviors, are actually in the text. They're in the modern day understanding or reconciliation for our own brains as to how to get us to a point of, oh, that makes so much sense, which I think in this class we've recognized they might have thought it made sense, but it actually doesn't at all times. So I just wanted to highlight that point, Paul. Here, Larry.
I just wanted to comment. I can't remember if we talked about it, but what's striking for me in verse 13, where we are right now, is the emphasis on proceduralism. And when I think about the stories, I think about Achashverosh getting mad and all, but the story itself, and I don't know that the commentators are actually focusing on this very much. Maybe you'll guide us in that. The story is telling us that this is a very well-organized society, and that Achashverosh, despite the fact that we think of him as a buffoonish character, actually wasn't. Yeah. Thinking of an American president, previous, not current, who had that reputation for being somewhat buffoonish, but was actually quite a proceduralist himself. And it talks about dat v'din. And so I'm thinking that, and later on in the story, we know this is true, in particular with the story about the ring and the, once you've commanded something, you can't take it back, you can, that sort of thing. But Judaism is very much, we are very much a people of, and a religion of dat v'din. Right. So I'm wondering if maybe they weren't, the text itself wasn't making a point that this is a society very much like our own.
Fabulous. Does someone else have, oh, Rick had a hand. I knew I saw a hand somewhere.
Yeah, hi. I'm just looking at the page that you put up here.
Yes.
And my page 6, it had the Rashi on Esther 1:14:1. That's exactly the same. But above that, I have 113.1. Oh, there it is.
Yeah.
And then the next line doesn't appear on the paper that you made. Okay.
That's right.
I just wanted to make sure I was seeing what I was seeing. Okay.
You are seeing what you are seeing. I was explaining this earlier that sometimes Safaria likes to just decide what I actually want on a source sheet. And so though I put all the verses on the source sheet, or so I thought, it decided not to add 14. So I added it in just before class started, just so everyone could see it. So that was yeah, sure. It was just a technical error. I'll blame Safaria. It's easy to do. Okay. Anything else that people want to add before we jump into verse 14? Okay. And I think I'm glad that Larry spoke last in terms of his comment, because I think that's going to actually help us very much understand the next pieces, especially coming out of the Vashti, let's call it vignette, and going into the next parts of the Megillah. It'll be really important for us to have what Larry said in the back of our minds, also as a way of understanding, like, this is not just satire, right? We spent a lot of the first classes talking about how this is also in parallel to much of the history that we now know, whether our own or others. And so it's not just satire. It's not just a fun kid story to listen to while dressed up. It actually has some relevance in terms of both our own religion, the cultures that were surrounding us at the time, and just society of the time, and potentially, to Larry's point, right, what we should assume of our own cultures, rituals, and religion today. All right, someone want to read verse 14 for us? This is a lot of names, more so than anything else. So if anybody's great with names, feel free. But don't all jump at once. You want to do it, Barry? Yeah. Do you want to read the verse? Oh, well, let's learn it first, and then you're welcome to talk on it. You want to do it? Okay.
V'hakarov elav karshna shtar admata tarshish meres marsna memuchan shviat sarei paras u'madai ro'ei pnei hamelech hayoshvim rishonim b'malchut. Sure. I'll read the translation, but then I want to go back. His closest advisors were Karshena, Shtar, Admata, Tarshish, Meres, Marsena, and Mimukan, the 7 ministers of Persia and Media who had access to the royal presence and occupied the first place in the kingdom. So I just want to go back to the Ro'eh Bnei HaMelech. So it's translated exactly, right? It's looking at the face of the sitting king, right? The first ministers, basically. Yeah.
Great. Any other thoughts or questions on the verse? Yeah, Diane.
So I just want to say something. So Benji Siegel says that the names are actually they sound Persian. And they actually, I lost the place. They actually have Persian roots, which suggests that this was meant for a Persian audience, because those names wouldn't have made sense to anybody else.
One of the aspects of seeing names in any text, but especially in the text that we're looking at, is that it really roots you in both what Diane just said in terms of audience, but also where were we, right? This was being written, when we look at pieces of Torah or really Tanakh, we also have a general sense of that. Is something written in Hebrew? Is something written in Aramaic? Are there aspects of Hebrew that are used that are Hebrew words that we wouldn't understand? Are there places with different names? Because at the time, the names were not Hebrew, they were something else, right? So when we look at texts, I talk about this quite often when I talk about a ketubah, right? A ketubah, a traditional ketubah, is written in Aramaic. When people want to look, most of it, there are a few moments of Hebrew, but most of it is written in Aramaic. And when you look at a legal document in 2026, people often wonder, why do I have a legal document in a language that I definitely don't speak, right? Hebrew is maybe adjacent to a language I speak, but Aramaic I really don't speak. And often what I talk about is the fact that the legal language for that text was Aramaic. And so that's the text. I mean, that's the text, that's the language that's used. And so similar to what Diane just pointed out, this tells us who the audience was, which I hadn't actually even thought of, and also just what was the language being spoken and the people who were around based off of these names, rather than the names that we might expect, whether in terms of language or actual names of places that we might know in our own Hebrew language. There were multiple hands. Okay, Barry, Rebecca, I thought you had your hand up. Stevie, we're just going to go down the line. Okay.
So Rashi opens up.
Wait, we haven't read Rashi yet. So do you want to talk on the verse, or do you want to talk on the Rashi?
On the Rashi.
Okay, so let's skip. We'll go to the Rashi next when we read the Rashi.
It says here that the existence of a king's council of 7 is confirmed in the book of Ezra and also by Herodotus and Josephus. These counselors had access to the kings at all times. In other words, saw the king's face, except when he was in the company of one of his wives.
Great. Well, that's a nice boundary. Glad he had some alone time. Yeah, so it does make sense. I mean, remember that at the beginning of the Megillah, I don't remember exactly which verse it was. I might not find it very quickly. Remember that we have this association that there are people around, right? That there are people for the king to go to. And so these advisors, right, when he's dealing with Vashti, he has these eunuchs, which in this particular case are a different group of humans. But we're talking about the leader of the kingdom, the nation, whatever, are going to have people around them to advise them. And I think it's hysterical that they had to point out that they got FaceTime, literally, but also that there were times in which they were not in his presence. Rachel.
Earlier in this chapter, the whole party that Ahasuerus is throwing that goes on for days and weeks is to celebrate or mark the consolidation of his kingdom from these other kingdoms he's conquered. And I'm thinking, could these names be representative of those conquered groups?
Oh, interesting. I don't know. That's an interesting point. I don't know that those groups would have been his advisors, though, because they would have been coming from further away. So I think, to Leonard's point, and by the way, the verse I was looking for was the verse right before, but I was looking too far back. But this idea that there were people at his right hand, right, or left hand, but at his beck and call, in front of him, next to him. I don't know that they would have been the same people. But it's an interesting idea. It at least shows that there were people around who were advising him, no matter the distance. Yeah.
Well, one model is the people around him were all his buddies that he assigned. You're the minister to this direction, and you're the minister to that direction. Or as he conquered these other peoples, he took leadership from there with him.
Sure. Yeah, that's very possible. I think that probably was just a general tactic, right, of keeping your enemies closer, I guess. But just making sure that you had intel, that you understood different peoples who were surrounding you. And so once you had access to them, using leaders, I think of this, and maybe I'm completely wrong, but I think of this verse as kind of introducing us to his cabinet, right? Of like, think of the West Wing, right? Like, who are the different people that are going to be leading him through he's the head honcho, but who are going to be the different people that are his senior staff, right? Or that, right? That I guess I'm a little bit more aware of. But who are going to be around to help him with these different tasks that maybe they have strengths in that he doesn't have strengths in. To your point, Rachel, maybe they come from a different place that's going to help him in terms of his own leadership and conquering, etc. Okay, Rebecca, and then Steve. Oh, Joel, sorry. Rebecca, and then Joel, and then Rebecca, and then Stevie.
I just want, if each of these people had their own strengths,
yeah,
I don't know what they all were, but I know that the guy who's expert in interpreting documents, it must be Shtar.
Ah, very good. Does everybody understand that joke? Okay, well, Larry very loudly understands that joke. The idea is that a shtar means document, so he was making a joke. Shetar would be the name of someone who knew how to deal with a shtar. That was the joke. It was very good.
Spelled with a tet, though.
Exactly. I was going to say that too, but I felt like that was going too deep into it. Okay, Rebecca.
I think what it points out here, that these 7 people are the closest to him in terms of the kingdom, is that they're viewing the issue with Vashti not as a marital or personal issue, but there's like a diplomatic or a political issue that will affect the entire kingdom, or it's, in that respect, it's more important than just her not doing what he wanted that evening.
Right, that his people had to get involved, that not just because they were marriage counselors, but because this was an issue beyond that. Yeah, Stevie.
So the word rishon in Hebrew is ambiguous, as it can be in some English constructions. It comes up a lot when in talking about Reshit Priyadama, like the first fruits. Are they first in chronologically, or are they first in importance in some sort of ranking? So Rashi is going to take a stand here and say that, yes, this is the cabinet, right? These are the 7 most important or powerful, closest advisors. But Hayshrim Rishon b'Malchut could alternatively mean like they've been here longer than the king, right? They were
Rishon,
right? They were already sort of in some leadership position, as opposed, right? I mean. Either way, it's sort of the cabinet, because it begins with saying these are the 7 that are closest to him. But it could be that like they were sitting there before him and they're sort of, that's the dynamic, or it could be just that they're, like just another description of their, closeness.
Yeah. Okay, Diane's going to read the Rashi for us. Oh, yeah, sure.
So what Joel did is called a homonymic pun, which I know he's an expert in. And Mata must have been the Minister of Interior Lands, and you can go on and on. But, hold on, sorry. Where am I? Here I am. Roe Pnei HaMelech. Roe is a shepherd. Oh. Yes. It's a homonymic pun, right? It sounds like, but it doesn't read like. Joel did the same thing. They are the shepherds of the king. They're the ones who are keeping the king in control.
That's nice.
Advising him. Right. They're the guide rails for the king. They're not simply people who are the yes men.
That's nice. That's very nice.
Delegates to Trump's first cabinet as opposed to his current cabinet.
Okay, we're going to let that one just sit in the room. Okay, Diane, Rashi.
הקרוב אליו. לערוך דבריו לפניהם. אלו הם קרשנה, שטר וכולי. Okay, so most intimately associated with him, the closest to him, to present his affairs before them. And they are, and then the names.
Right. Great. So Stevie already alluded to this, but what Rashi is getting to is that these really were the people who were closest to him, quite literally, that if there were things to bring up, these were the people who heard it first, right? So to Joel's point, the senior staff, right? If there's something to be brought up before it goes to a general staff, to a community, etc., it's brought first to the people closest in, to the senior staff or to the cabinet, whatever you want to call it, and then it gets disseminated out even further. Barry, you wanted to say something?
Well, first I want to speak.
Steve, what you brought up. Ahasuerus, he bought his way into this kingship. So there was a structure that preceded him. So I go along with it, that these ministers were already there. Okay. Now, what I want to do is Rashi opens up these names. He says are allusions to the temple procedures and how that all happened, and these names refer to the sacrificial offerings. So examples: Karshena, those who offer the karim, the lambs. Shatar, not shtar, but shatar, those who offered shatei, the pigeons. The atmana relates to the adama, the ground earth representing the aktar belt of earth, and so on and on. What he's bringing up is there's a tension between the Persian throne and the divine service. This is Rashi, that he's interpreted these names through the lens of temple sacrifices. Rashi suggests that even while Ahasuerus and his advisors were indulging in their feasts, the merits of the Jewish people's past, future service in the temple were being invoked in the heavenly spheres, and it also brings up that the cups and the items they were using in this feast were stolen from the temple. So there's a tension here. This is not just the play and the stuff that the Persians are doing, but there's the history of the Jewish people that's ingrained in this whole event.
Rashi says that, or that's in the Talmud somewhere?
Well,
because it's not in a Rashi commentary. So I would just be curious to know if it's coming in more modern day time, similar to what we all just did today with the names. If rabbis are then trying to...
Rashi cites the Agadat Esther.
Oh, okay. So Midrash.
I didn't look that up.
Got it. Okay. Thank you for sharing that. All right, let's go to the next verse, to verse 15. Someone want to read it for us? Diane just read. Someone else? Joel, Rebecca. I'm just calling on random. Oh, any Rebecca. This Rebecca's already talking, so any other Rebecca. You can go, Rebecca. Yeah, go. Yeah.
Kedat ma la'asot b'malka Vashti al asher lo asta et ma'amar hamelech Achashverosh b'yad hasirasim.
Great.
What shall be done to Queen Vashti on that she didn't do what King Ahasuerus said, conveyed by the eunuchs.
Or by the hands of, yeah. Okay, so just to point this out very quickly, we are both talking about a cabinet, but also the eunuchs, right? These are different people. The eunuchs seem to be the ones who are doing the task, right, of going to get Vashti, or kind of are the, messengers. Yeah, I was going to make a pun, like the handymen, right? Like they're going to do the handiwork, right, of whatever King Ahasuerus needs done. In this case, going to get Vashti. But he's asking the question of his senior staff or his cabinet. He's not asking it of the people who did the task, which I just want to point out seems a little bit bizarre, right? You might want to go to the people who actually tried to do the task for you and see from them why they think that this didn't happen. But we can put that aside for a moment. That would be the most direct way of finding an answer. But instead, he goes to his cabinet. What does kedat mean? Okay, according to law, right? So to go back to Rebecca's point, I think it was, this is not just about marital issues or family issues or, needing some kind of counseling. This is now getting to a point of the king wondering what to legally do about the fact that Vashti is not going to do something that he asked to do. Okay, other thoughts and questions on the verse? Larry?
Just a quick question. Yeah. Besides the next verse, which says that Memuchan answered, how do we know this is a question? Why is this in quotes? And everybody has this as a question being asked by the king. And maybe I'm missing something in the Hebrew, but it doesn't say V'yomer or the king asked. There's nothing to suggest that this is actually a statement by the king. Is there?
Yeah. Yes, there is.
Oh, yeah. The key thing is that the verse,
the voice of God,
the verse we just read is what doesn't fit. If you read straight from verse 13 to verse 15, it makes a lot more sense. So, right, like that's the names seem to be the aberration.
Yeah, that was good. Right. Great. And I also think that, and Rick, we can go to you next. You've had your hand up for like 10 minutes. But we can, if we look through, it's a really good point, Stevie. If we look through from verse 13, we recognize that they're kind of taking an aside here to say, this is what was being said, and to whom? Let us tell you about this cabinet of guys. But I would say that even had we not read verse 13, there's just the idea of ma la'asot, right? He probably isn't talking to himself, right? So it's somewhat clear in that as a question, but good that we have Vayomer HaMelech in verse 13. Okay, Rick is going to tell us about some trope that tells us that it's a question.
A little bit, but yeah, the king consulted the sages, so that's the answer to Larry. So this Mala Asot, I heard in my head chapter 6, where the king says the same thing. He's asking Haman, hey, what should be done to the person that the king wants to honor? And then Haman thinks it's all about him, because it's all about him. And then he says, put him on a horse and all the rest. So in chapter 6, in two places, in the first place, Mala Asot, I know it's reading ahead, but this is foreshadowing the one of the critical events. Here it is, verse 6. So chapter 6, verse 6, there it's a Zakef Gadol, and then the next word is a Zakef Gadol, which is pretty dramatic. It goes Malasot, the way I sing it, and then Ba'ish, what should be done to the man. So here he's asking what should be done to the woman, and there he's going to ask what should be done to the man. And then twice it goes, Kacha ye'aseh la'ish. This is what should be done to the man. You put him on a horse. And all that. So I like the foreshadowing of those two words. And what should be done? It's the major question in life, right? What are you supposed to do? In the Torah, there's do this, do that, asa this, asa that. And here we have it again in the Megillah that the question is what should be done. So I'll stop there.
No, that was great. Thank you. Thank you for that. Yeah, Norm.
Thank you. I think that the eunuchs are a servant class. They're not powerful people. They're not intellectual advisors or social advisors or, strong people in their own right. They were, if you will, not even able to protect their own manhood. Their main purpose is you can send them among women without worry that they're going to be distracted or sexually abuse any of them. And that's because of what was done to them. So I would not expect him, it might be worthy to question to make sure you got the facts of Vashti's message correctly and that your message to Vashti came through clearly. But one would not expect to consult them about a policy matter.
Yeah, no, I wasn't making the claim that they would be policy advisors, but more so just if something happens, right? If I ask Joel to go and do something and then I and then he comes back and tells me that something didn't happen, to then go to other people to say, why did this, what should we do about the fact that this happened? It might be interesting to hear from the person who firsthand had the experience, just to give you a window in if you weren't there, but not to make policy, just to have an idea of what the actual occasion, what ensued in the actual moment. Yeah, Leonard.
I just want to repeat something that I'd said last time, that the word dot actually comes from Persian.
Great. Yeah. Yeah. Sure.
So with all due respect, I disagree that the eunuchs, that the Sarasim were powerless. They were in fact very powerful people. And in ancient Persia, the reason that they were eunuchs was to prevent them from forming dynasties of their own. But they were put in very powerful positions. So they couldn't be a threat to the king, but they were strong advisors to the king. There's a comment in the Sansino. I don't know the source, but then it's going to continue in the further verses. The king wishes to exonerate her, Vashti, and seeks legal justification for this act without losing prestige. And I won't read what comes next, but apparently in Midrash Rabbah, there's a whole long story along taking this thread.
So
No.
It's interesting because in an older version of Cincino, it says exactly the opposite. The king wishes to give a semblance of law to the punishment which in his rage compels him to inflict upon Vashti.
Well, everyone has, everyone changes. Oh. The source is Yosef Lekach. No, I mean, it's possible it's the author of a book that I know, but I've never heard that name before. Right, exactly. Okay, yeah, Rebecca. And then can you read the Rashi after the statement you're about to make?
Yes.
Okay, great.
I was just, I know Larry likes to look for the poetry in the wordplay. And I was just thinking how, so we have the council of the seven princes, and we have seven eunuchs, because we know seven was a special number there. And the princes are listed, the first one being Karshena through to Mumuchan. And the eunuchs are the opposite. Mamuchan, I'm sorry. That one is Mamuchan. The other one is Mahuman, the eunuchs. Mahuman all the way through to Karkas. So it's, the M through the C through the M. There's kind of some parallels in the listing of their names.
Very nice. Okay, Rashi.
Okay. Kadat ma la'asot. So concerning the law of what to do, Musav al vayomer hamelach lachachamim. This refers back to the king talk to the sages.
So this is saying actually what I said when we were talking about the previous verse, which is that this is a reminder that the king has gone to advisors before to ask what to do, right? That he's not alone in understanding procedures or how to move things forward. It's not particularly interesting Rashi, but because we're learning the Rashi, I included it. But we're going to go on to the next verse, unless someone has something enlightening to say about this kind of boring Rashi. Oh, Marshall. Yeah. Wait, use a microphone, because I'm sure whatever you're going to say is great.
I just wanted to give an alternative translation of the verse.
Oh, great.
Because of when Rebecca translated the word al as sort of on.
Right.
Here's an alternative to it.
Okay.
According to the law, what shall be done to Queen Vashti inasmuch? So that's how this translation gives a word for al, as she did not comply with the order of the king brought by the hand of the chamberlains. So here the word sarisim is called chamberlains.
Yeah.
Has nothing to do about their physical capabilities, but what kind of a role do they now fulfill?
Great. Okay, verse 16. Joel, you have the microphone. You want to read it for us?
Vayomer mumuchan lifnei hamelech v'hasarim lo al hamelech levado avta v'shtei
Vashti.
Vashti v'hamalka ki al kol hasarim
Sorry.
kol hasarim ve'al kol ha'amim asher bechol medinot hamelech Achashverosh. So Memuchan said to the king and to the officials, it's not on the king himself. What is avta?
That she's gone against.
Okay.
Or here the word offense is used.
Oh, so it's not just against the king that she's gone against, that Vashti has gone against, because all it's against all the officials and all the people that are in the they're all the lands of the king.
Great. Okay. So I think this is a very important verse. I want to share one thing and then I'm curious to hear what you all think. When we were growing up as kids, my mom, whose birthday it is today, said that what was most important was that because we all shared the same last name, though I'm sure it would have been the same had we not shared the same last name, but because people knew that we were related, that it was important that we be a reflection, not just on ourselves, but for everybody else. That if I did something, that it was going to be a reflection on my siblings, it was going to be a reflection on my parents, it was going to be a reflection on my grandparents, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. That seems to be what he's basically coming to the king to say. Hey, buddy, we understand that you're worried about this, but you should be even more worried about this because this isn't just to you, right? Again, to go back to Rebecca's point, this isn't just about the fact that she's your queen. This is actually a bad reflection on the entirety of the nation because she represents something bigger than just herself, right? So even though she is an individual, and especially based off of the verses that we read in the previous weeks, right? We want to think of her as someone who has agency. So too, she should remember that she's a figurehead, right? That she holds power over these different nations, and that means something. So that seems to be what Memuchan is saying. So I just wanted to point that out because I think it's a very interesting turning point. First of all, it shows that people should always have advisors, that no one should be alone in making their own legislation or decisions. But it also just shows that as much as we, the readers, and probably the people at the time who were backing her wanted Vashti to have agency, she also should have remembered that she was a leader and had certain roles, whether or not we like what those roles were. Okay, Stevie, Larry, I thought I saw another hand. Norm.
I mean, maybe there is some truth to, the royal family, being an example to others, but this really feels to me like some politicians today that just try to exploit every scandal to make people angry and say that the stakes are higher and higher and telling you, who to blame for it. And this feels like something that didn't need to be escalated, but Mumchan, he's ready to escalate.
That's interesting. That's like the opposite read. Yeah, interesting.
Well, given what Stevie just said at the end, suggests that maybe you're open to this alternative interpretation, not the one that Leonard Cincino, older Cincino, has, because if in fact the king is saying, "Oh, I'm really mad, I want to kill her," then Memuchan is saying, "Yeah, but we need to do this in a proper way." But now I'm going to read what my Cincino has here. Okay, Memuchan probably realized that it was the king's wish to exonerate Vashti. He therefore gave advice which would suggest her punishment was a matter of public policy and welfare of the state, and consequently, the king had no right to forgive her. It's the same source, which is Yosef Lekach, who apparently is Eliezer ben Elijah Ashkenazi, who wrote a book of commentary on Megillat Esther.
Nice.
Memuchan appears as an unknown character who condemns Vashti without any apparent motive. The rabbis identify him as Haman. Although he was the most insignificant of the seven, judging from the order of his appearance, he was the first to speak up. This shows that an ignoramus is always the first to speak. Haman had reason to resent Vashti. Some say that she struck him in the face with her shoe. Others say that she failed to invite his wife to the feast. And still others say that he had a daughter whom she wished to marry off to the king. I guess that's Vashti, Zeresh wished to marry off to the king. Achashverosh that's all from Midrash Rabbah, by the way.
Yeah. These are rabbis that need some therapy. Okay.
Almost done. Achashverosh bore a grudge against Haman for this is
go for it.
Bore a grudge against Haman for advising him to execute Vashti until finally Esther was instrumental in his death. What a strange alternative interpretation.
Yeah, that was a good story. It's it could be made into a movie. Or a Megillah. Yeah.
I think it is also an illustration of the fact that at least in Persia, there was a male patriarchy bent on keeping women subservient throughout the empire.
Okay. Yeah, maybe.
So I don't see evidence of that. But if you think about Vashti was a public figure, and if she is not following the king's command, and presumably as a king he had pretty much absolute power, then if she's exonerated, then anybody can rise up against the king.
Kal v'chomer, exactly. Right. So that is similar to the point that I was making, which, by the way, I believe, and for this time in our history and also in Vashti's time of our history, women should obviously be able to have autonomy, especially over their bodies and agency over their actions. I am not trying to suggest otherwise. What I'm trying to point out is no matter her gender, right, she was a person in a certain role. And had she been a male, I would have been saying the same thing. If you do something as your own self, knowing that you have a certain type of role, it's just a fact that you'll be seen differently no matter what that decision is. Again, I'm not suggesting that her decision was incorrect. I'm just validating the fact that it makes sense that someone then came to the king and said, wait a second, you have to remember this isn't your wife only. This is also someone who has a leadership position over all these other nations who, to Diane's point, are going to see her as a model of actions that can be taken, right? So I want to make sure that that's very clear. I definitely am not suggesting that what happened to Vashti nor the decision that she made were somehow incorrect or that the king's actions were correct. All the more so, I think what's important for us to remember is that each character in the Megillah and elsewhere are both people that have personal relationship and also public relationships. And that's what it seems to be pointing out here that this advisor was saying. Now, imagining that this is Haman puts a whole different spin in our brains as to why he might have been saying what he was saying. So if we just think of this as Memuchan, some random advisor, and not Haman, I think it's easier for us to potentially imagine that this was not supposed to be evil, but rather was supposed to just simply be a reminder that this was a bigger deal than just dealing with someone who was a partner. Yeah, Norm.
We don't know exactly what message she intended to convey when she declined his order. Presumably, there was a schedule in place, there were orders in place. The king had ordered that she should be hosting this women's event. And in Mittendrinnen, unexpectedly, eunuchs show up saying, come and perform for the men, probably nakedly. And she says, this is not what had been planned. This is not what I'm supposed to be doing. Please explain to the king that I'm carrying out his previous orders. And so I can't come right now and do this. and I'll be happy to discuss it later or scheduled for later or come once we have finished this, but I can't do it this instant. And if that message came through clearly, his attitude about the whole thing might have been very different. But she is never allowed to re-litigate the issue. She's simply, they're simply going to say, this is the punishment, and it's going to get carried out. And if it instead had been interrupted, it would have been very bad, in my opinion.
Okay, so I just, and that was very eloquently said. I just want to point out a lot of what you just inserted into that was midrash, right? So it's important for us to remember what's midrash and what's Megillah. So when we think about the story, right, you are correct that our rabbis have come to help us understand in their day and for our day what it might have been like for her, and what we can imagine it was like for everybody. That doesn't mean that that's what the Megillah says. So I just want to make sure that that's very, very clear. Okay, great. But I do think it's important for us to recognize, and I don't know that we'll get there today, but there's really no reconciliation to this at all. We kind of just move on. So, which we'll see in a few verses. Again, potentially not today. Barry.
There's a parallel between Vashti's the responsibility of her position, parallel to the verse in Shemini that we just read. The what Moshe is explaining to Aaron is because of their position, their closeness, the closest to God. Therefore, the result is going to be extreme.
Yeah. Okay. Who read Joel? Can you read the Rashi for us?
ויאמרו לפני המלך והשרים לא על המלך לבדו. Oh, that's the.
Wait, what are you reading?
Avta, Lashon Avon. Aha.
Oh, but that was a good refresher of the verse. Okay, thank you.
So, yeah, it's not a common word to be used as a verb, so Rashi felt the need to explain it.
Yeah, and where do you know the word Avon from? Yes, Avon v'fesha, right? The 13 attributes. Great. Okay. Let's do this next verse because I think it's important to not lose the consistency between the last verse and this one, because I think this is going to help us quite a bit. Does anybody want to read verse 17 for us? Great. Leonard needs a microphone. And a magnifying glass. Great.
Let's do it this way. Ki yetzei devar ha-malka al kol hanashim lehavzot ba'alehen u'be'enehem be'omran hamelech Achashverosh amar lahavi et Vashti ha-malka lefanav ve'lo ba'a. Okay. So, and the word went out. And the word
when or because of, right? So it's not just and, but it's right. There's a time, what's the word I'm looking for? Like, condition, yeah, around it, right? Like it's for or because or if the word went out, yeah.
Well, the word will go out that the queen, concerning the queen,
Mm-hmm.
And all the women will contempt or be contemptible to their husbands in their eyes, or their husbands will become contemptible in the women's eyes.
Correct.
Saying that King Ahasuerus said to bring Vashti the queen before him, and she didn't come.
Okay. So the reason I wanted to make sure we read this verse along with the last one is because now, hopefully, now you see what I'm getting at, which is that there was, and by the way, great, right? I hope that all the women, because of Vashti, felt like they had more power and could go against their husbands and say no, right? I am hopeful that this verse came to be true. They didn't see it that way. They didn't see it as a positive like I do. But yeah, I hope that's the case. But what they're saying here is an exact reaction to the verse before, which is Vashti is not just Vashti, a lovely woman living on Corning who gets to go about her day and no one knows her. This is a person who has a name and has some influence, and by doing something has influence on others to behave in a similar way. And again, I think that that's great. The king and his people did not think that was so great. And so that's the concern, right? And the concern could be a really wonderful outcome, or could be a really concerning, not to use the same word twice, outcome, right? And that is what Memuchan is saying. He's simply, I think, saying to Achashverosh, though Larry's therapy-ridden text of Sonsino expresses it differently. What Memuchan is trying to say to the king is, hey guy, remember that your wife is not just your wife. You are the king, she is the queen. That's a big deal, and that has influence on lots of people. So this is the reason the Hebrew is important here is especially because what they're basically saying is word is getting around, right? Ki yetzei dvar hamalka. If word gets out that this is what the queen did, and then it just tells us what the queen did, right? That she didn't come before the king. That's going to be a problem, right? That's going to be the issue that they're talking about. For time's sake, Leonard, can you just read the Rashi for us, and then we can get comments if people have them?
17.
Yeah.
Ki yetzei davar hamalka al kol hanashim ze zivta shebizta et hamelech al kol hanashim lehavzot af hen et ba'alehen. Okay. For the affair of the queen will extend to all women, that she showed contempt for the king. This will cause all women to show contempt for their husbands as well.
Okay, so I just want to thank you. I just want to point out that there are other ways of defining this word bista. One is disgrace, which I actually think might be a little bit closer to what we're trying to understand is the worry here. Even the English for the dibur hamatchil is not really so accurate, right? Ki yetzei dvar hamalka al kol hanashim. It's not for the affair of the queen. It's because of what the queen did that this word is going to get out to all of these women. So I just want to make sure that we know that bista, first of all, it's always interesting to me when a commentator tries to comment by using the same word in just two different tenses to make their point, right? So zeh shebista and then lehavzot, like it's unclear. It's unclear what Rashi's trying to get at here by using that same word, which is also in the verse, of course, to get us to understand. But that there's some kind of disgrace, right? That because she didn't come to the king, that now all these other women are going to think, wow, we actually have power to say no to our husbands. Yeah, Barry.
So there's a midrash implication here that the need for law to protect husbands, that in Persian culture at that time, husbands' positions may not have been as strong as they would have preferred, and law was necessary to protect it. And that's why they needed to rule in this case. Another point here is that taking Vashti's case and turning this into a national, empire-wide predicament is similar to Muhan, who is Haman, who takes the Mordecai instance and taking that to destroy an entire people.
Okay, we don't know that he's Haman. I just want to make sure that we're all very clear on that. Memuchan is not necessarily Haman, right? So we're not assuming that he shows up later as another character. Our rabbis are equating those two people because of their behaviors, but not because they're actually the same. I just want to make sure that's very, very, very clear. One thing that I'll just add here is that in a different commentary, there's concern, and the rabbis want to make sure that we understand that the word that Devar Hamalka, sorry, this is just in English, so I wanted to look back in the Hebrew, that Devar Hamalka could be seen as her decree. But that the rabbis want us to understand, and I actually think this is where the rabbis are helping us understand rather than implying story to get us to make excuses around something. The rabbis want us to understand this was not a decree. She was not trying to make a decree just because she's a queen. We do not need to assume that she was trying to make a decree. The people were literally worried that her words were going to affect behavior of other women. And the way that I would turn this on its head, and this is part of the reason that I find Vashti's character so fascinating, is I think then to Barry's point about being scared of the men and needing something to protect the men, I think what this is saying is that the men were pretty sure that the women were quite powerful, right? And didn't actually know how to handle that because that was not the way that things had gone in society up until now. And so the fact that Vashti is showing that she can be powerful, albeit she might get punished for trying to assert her power, but the fact that she could have some agency to say no to something, right, is concerning to the men because it's never been seen before to have a woman, let alone a queen, come and say, nah, don't feel like it, not going to do that, right? And that's scary. That change of culture, that change of tradition, that change of just status, right, which is what that does, is scary. And so to Barry's point, the men are kind of trying to figure out, oh, all right, well, how do we keep that power and that sense of agency caged to make sure that doesn't happen? Yeah, Marshall. Can you have a mic? Thank you.
Robert Alter has a different translation of the word devar.
Oh, great.
Which I think is closer as to what's happening here.
Great.
So he said the Queen's Act, ACT, will go out to all the women to hold their husbands in contempt for their eyes when they will say, quote, King Ahasuerus said to bring Vashti before him, and she did not come. So it's focusing on her refusal to come.
Right.
And maybe not anything that she has specifically said.
Oh, for sure. Yeah. Which is what I think they're getting at by saying that this wasn't a decree, but rather her actions that would get out by word of mouth and the actions that she took. Okay. We're on a roll. Now we know where we are. So we'll come together next week, verse 18. Yeah, we'll go from there. Any final 30-second words? Yes, Joel.
I thought it was interesting that it might be Haman, and thinking maybe that this was his reward for giving this advice was he was promoted to vizier.
I think that's where the rabbis are getting that these could be the same characters. Correct. I think that there's just no all I'm trying to say is that it's very possible that this is the case. There's just no evidence around it, so I don't want us to read into the beginning part of the story with the end part of the story, thinking that they are the same character. But yes, I think, and to Stevie's point, I think there are many character similarities, whether good or bad, that are coming out in these two characters that make them seem like they might have been similar. And I hadn't thought about the idea that maybe he was just then, what's the word? Promoted. Thank you. I was like, going up.
But he got promoted.
Right. In Persian, the word Haman could mean elevated. So it could mean a title more than a name.
Wow. Okay. More next week. See y'all then.
You've been listening to another in our series of podcasts from Temple Beth Am, a dynamic center for conservative Judaism in Los Angeles. If you enjoy these podcasts, we invite you to write a review on the Apple Podcast website or wherever you get your podcasts. For more information on Temple Beth Am, Los Angeles, please visit www.tbala.org.